Despite being 10 years older than her, Ginette Neveu was her contemporary in Carl Flesch's class, and in 2009 Ida Handel recalled her first impressions of Neveu. I saw this tall, almost masculine looking lady and I began to giggle. She was about 16 or 17 and I was 7. I said to my father, I wonder what this creature could show. Then she began to play Wieniawski's Concerto in F minor, and I stopped smiling. The impact was enormous, like a volcano. I said, oh my God, this is the greatest performance I've ever heard. That was my introduction to Ginette Neveu. It was not the volume of her sound that mattered. It was the tremendous assurance. A lot of people have played this concerto since, with difficulty. She attacked it with such magnitude, but not of sound. The attack was so masterful, and that was what mesmerized me. The Père Lachaise Cemetery, also known as the Cimetière de l'Est, is the largest cemetery in Paris, covering 43 hectares. It is one of the parks and gardens managed by the Paris City Council. It's a unique place for meditation and reverie, steeped in art, culture and history. As you stroll through its maze of stones and vegetation. So I'm just in the Père Lachaise Cemetery. It's easy enough to find the main ones like Jim Morrison or Frédéric Chopin because they are on Google Maps, you can tap them in. But finding Ginette Neveu's grave has proved to be like a needle in a haystack. I did know that it was near Chopin's grave, and then I had another map that I'd found online. So this is Bellini, and I think Neveu is, like, I'm very close now, so hopefully I will find it. But it's not that easy. It's huge, this place. So I think I've found the tomb of Ginette Neveu. Here we are. What a wonderful violinist, and a very tragic end in a plane crash. She had an omobono Stradivari instrument, which I think perished with her in the crash, and she left her mark in a massive way, but she died so young. If she'd lived longer, wow, her contribution would have been even greater. So it's great to come here and pay her homage. But blooming hard to find the grave. And of course, the brother of Ginette Neveu was Jean Neveu, who sadly also died in that same plane crash. I believe he was a fine pianist. She was born in 1919 and died tragically in 1949 at the age of 30 in a plane crash. We could summarise it this way: the power and passion of the remarkable French virtuoso whose career was cut short in its prime. Let's look at the chronology of Neveu's life. In 1919 she was born in Paris. In 1933 made her official Paris debut. In 1935 came first in the first international Wieniawski competition, so she won first prize ahead of David Oistrakh, who came second. 1937 marked her US debut, and 1945 her London debut. Then in 1949, tragically, she was killed in an air crash, aged just 30. Now let's look at Ginette Neveu's early life. Neveu was by all accounts a child prodigy and was already playing by the age of 5. Her first teacher was her mother, an accomplished player in her own right. She was sent to the class of Line Taluel and aged only 7 performed the Bruck First Concerto with the Colonne Orchestra at the Salle Gaveau in Paris. 2 years later, she won a prize from the city for a performance of the Mendelssohn E minor concerto and went on to win the Paris Conservatoire's violin prize. After only 8 months at the institution, she was still only 11. Wow. So at the Paris Conservatoire, she studied with Jules Boucherie and she studied composition with Nadine Boulanger, the great teacher of composition in France. She continued her studies first with Wieniawski, and then, having been talent spotted at the Vienna International Violin Competition, spent 4 years studying with Carl Flesch. Flesch offered to teach her without charge after hearing her at the Vienna International Violin Competition, at which, age 12, she was placed 4th out of 250 entrants. To quote Carl Flesch, this is what he said: "My child, you have received a gift from heaven and I have no wish to touch it. All I can do for you is to give you some purely technical advice." That's similar like with Leopold Auer with his students. He couldn't really teach them much in the way of technique. Indeed, many of them surpassed his own technique, but it was more interpretation and maturity, musical maturity, that these great pedagogues imparted to these already born talented players, prodigies, in some cases geniuses. Her brother Jean-Paul became a classical pianist and her eventual accompanist. The composer and organist Charles-Marie Widor, or Vidor maybe, written with a W, was their great uncle. Beginning of fame. In 1933, the Strad wrote that the little girl, she was now 13, played music by Mozart, Brahms, Pugnani and Moszkowski and Ravel Zigan in a manner which experienced performers might have envied. This gifted child should go far. As we mentioned, Neveu also studied with the revered composition teacher Nadia Boulanger, and Carl Flesch actually encouraged Neveu to include some of her own music compositions in recitals. Then 2 years later, from 1933 and 1935, of course, she beat David Oistrakh into second place at the first International Wieniawski competition in Warsaw, and tours of Poland and Germany followed with a US debut in 1937. Whether or not she was worthy of the first prize in the first Wieniawski competition is a matter of controversy. Some feel that probably David Oistrakh should have won that, but maybe she was worthy of the first prize. The Second World War inevitably interrupted her career. She didn't make her London debut until March 1945. During the war, she gave few concerts, nearly all of them in France. Now, this is an interesting point. Many invitations to play in Germany were turned down. I should have included her in the video I made about musicians and composers in the Third Reich. So that is one noteworthy moral stand that she must have taken. She turned down any opportunity to perform in Germany. She effectively decamped to Britain for much of the 1946 to 47 season, and also toured to North and South America in the post-war years. On to the topic of Ginette Neveu and the composer Francis Poulenc, the French composer. She did have the chance to request a sonata from Francis Poulenc, who would later relate, "To be honest, I didn't like the violin as a solo instrument, but how could I resist a suggestion from Ginette Neveu? The war had deprived us of Menuhin, Heifetz and Francescatti, but we had the unexpected fortune to have their equal on our doorstep." There are some tasty details in the violin part, entirely due to Ginette Neveu, who was a great help over the instrumental writing. No doubt her studies of composition with Nadine Boulanger again helped, as she advised the composer. The two premiered the sonata in June 1943. Ginette Neveu was said to have a masculine sound. According to Strad magazine, even Ida Handel, interviewed by the Strad's editor, used the word masculine to describe Neveu's sound. Added to her statuesque figure and her deep speaking voice, it's not impossible to believe suggestions made by some that she was intersex, or in older terminology, a hermaphrodite. I don't know about that. Either way, there is no denying that her sound and playing were muscular. And a tantalising snippet of her playing the chanson poème on YouTube shows her well-developed bow arm and the energy she brings to its use. I'll give you the reference in the description box. So she wasn't a feminine style player, quite the opposite. The Vienna Neues Tageblatt wrote, "If you close your eyes, you think you are listening to the vigorous playing of a man and not that of a little girl in a white frock." The sound of Ginette Neveu, she always gave the impression of inhabiting the music she was playing through her whole being, which gave her such magnetic presence on stage. This was a quote from the Stradian, I think. Let's just look at the Wieniawski competition and glance over the prize winners. Obviously Ginette Neveu and David Oistrakh stand out. Ida Handel only 7th. I wonder why. Maybe she still had to develop somewhat. Let's talk some more about this famous Wieniawski competition, the first competition, and the aftermath for Ginette Neveu. Unable to afford the cost of travel to Warsaw, the family was helped by Carl Flesch, who paid for the trip. Neveu was placed first, 26 points ahead of David Oistrakh, and in the final, again, she came in first. She was 15, Oistrakh was 27 at the time. The 15-year-old Neveu wooing the audience, especially with her rendition of Ravel's Zigan. So a Gallic or French piece, I guess fit like hand in glove for Neveu. Being a French player, she was able to interpret that in a way that won over the judges comprehensively. Neveu was immediately signed to an extensive touring contract, which over the next 2 years saw her give solo performances at the leading concert halls of Germany, Poland, the Soviet Union, the United States and Canada. Let's talk a bit about the instruments of Ginette Neveu. Early on, she owned a Nicolas Lupo violin of unknown year. It's a wonderful violin, by the way. If you go to the Ashmolean, you'll see a fine example of a decorated Nicolas Lupo violin in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. See my video on Oxford Violin Pilgrimage if you want to see what that looks like. But then, as if that wasn't a fine enough fiddle, in 1935 she bought a 1730 Omobono Stradivari to play at Wieniawski's competition. Obviously Omobono, the son of the great Antonio Stradivari. So she owned a violin by Omobono. This violin was to meet a sad end, as we'll later see. She later supplemented it with a GB Guadagnini. They say that GB Guadagnini is the number 3 violin. Strad, Del Gesù and Guadagnini in terms of quality. Strad and Del Gesù, debatable. Some people would say, well, let's just put them in joint first, shall we? And Guadagnini then would be the second most wonderful violin maker ever, according to some. Some might actually say that Carlo Bergonzi could vie for that 3rd place. Who knows? That's maybe a matter of opinion. In terms of bows, she had a Hill & Sons, Fleur de Lis and Chardon bows. A little more on Ginette Neveu's performance style. Wrote the critic of the New York Telegram, Ginette Neveu is an impressive figure, tall, dark, with an imposing manner. Whenever there is a rest for the violin, she stands like an acolyte, robed in white, her eyes fixed on the conductor. It is fascinating. I think you see a bit of that in the chanson poème, I believe. That is actually on film on YouTube, that performance. It has a smaller section dedicated to Ginette Neveu on page 317 under the chapter Women and the Violin. Since the advent of Marini, one of the most spectacular women violinist talents to emerge was Ginette Neveu, whose career was tragically cut short at the age of 30. A flesh pupil, Neveu had scarcely attained full artistic maturity at the time of her demise, so she had much more to give, according to Roth. She was a supreme colourist, as opposed to a host of outstanding violinists who may possess beauty of sound, but whose tonal projection and vibrato are essentially one-dimensional. Not true of Neveu. Neveu was a painter of exquisite musical soundscapes. Now we come on to the sad part, her tragic death. The French violinist Ginette Neveu was 30 when her plane crashed in the Azores. So the Hill & Sons Fleur-de-Lis and Chardon bows were recovered in her double case after the plane crash. Both instruments were presumed destroyed. So it's strange, isn't it, how they managed to recover the bows but not the instruments. Although the Guadagnini scroll later surfaced in Paris. I wonder what composite violin that now belongs to. Legends still circulate about Neveu being found in the wreckage with the crushed Stradivari clutched in her arms, contradicted by others that claim a local Azorean fiddler was later to be heard playing on the remarkable instrument. Well, if that's true, then maybe the instrument still survives, but it's unlikely, I think. And here we see Ginette Neveu's grave in the Père Lachaise Cemetery, Paris, in the Division 11, 11th division of the Père Lachaise ginormous cemetery in Paris, very close to the grave of Frédéric Chopin. So the 11th division is where all the musicians are buried in Père Lachaise. Here's some information on how you can locate Ginette Neveu's grave should you ever be passing through Paris and wish to find it in the Père Lachaise cemetery. I believe you can also take an organised tour of a couple of hours through the cemetery. Obviously, while you're there, you might as well go and see Oscar Wilde, Chopin and Jim Morrison's tombs. There's others of many famous people there, of course. Some images of the plane crash now. First of all, the type of plane seems quite advanced for 1949, although obviously it's still a propeller aeroplane. This is her getting on board the plane before the crash, and some photos of the crash, and a plaque which I think is on the hillside in the Azores. This is her shortly before that tragic flight. Details of her death and fellow passengers. She revisited America in January 1949, was scheduled to fly to New York again in late October. On the 27th, she and Jean arrived at Orly Airport ready to board the Lockheed Constellation airplane known as the Airplane of the Stars. In the departure lounge they met fellow passenger Marcel Cerdan, the North African boxer known as the Casablanca Clouter. Casablanca Clouter, then in a relationship with chanteuse Edith Piaf, who, as it happens, is also buried in the Père Lachaise. That's one of the famous tombs you can find there, Edith Piaf. A French tabloid photographer was there too, and in a high-spirited photo shoot, Cerdin posed holding Ginette's Stradivarius. Things took a less happy turn at 2 the following morning, when the plane attempting to land for refueling the Azores crashed, killing all 48 on board. I wonder if it's 2 in the morning, maybe she was fast asleep and didn't know what happened, so to speak. I hope so. A horrible way to die. Ginette's Strad and Guadagnini were also destroyed. The crash and the lives of the passengers are imagined in Adrien Bosch's award-winning 2014 novel Constellation. That could make an interesting read, that book. Some honours that Ginette Neveu received. She was posthumously awarded the Cross of the Légion d'Honneur. A street is named in her memory in the Montmartre region of Paris. Again, hopefully I can go and see that when I do my violin pilgrimage at the Cité de la Musique and I'm in Paris. It'd be nice. I'm just conscious that I might be taking on a bit too much on that trip. It's just a short trip to Paris, but we'll see. Music critics, a 1947 Carnegie Hall recital. So how many years is that after Heifetz? 30 years after Heifetz's 1917 debut. Composer critic Virgil Thomson, I think he was not very kind to Heifetz. Was it Virgil Thomson? I would have to make sure I'm not mixing up with the other kind of idiot music critic who spoke of Heifetz as having like his sound like silken underwear. Just a jealous guy. Anyway, I don't know if this was the same one. I'll double check. But he had certainly a glowing review for Ginette Neveu, calling her the finest from every point of view of the younger European artists. She is an interesting artist because she has rhythm and a special intensity all her own. Tributes. After Neveu's death, tributes poured in. The Queen of Belgium visited the grieving family who had lost both a son and a daughter. The composer, Francis Poulenc, whose violin sonata Neveu had premiered and parts of which she had contributed, wrote, "I'm haunted by the memory of Ginette Neveu. I had the greatest admiration for her and I loved her dearly. For Pablo Casals, her playing was one of the greatest revelations, both instrumental and musical, to the impression of perfection, balance and artistic taste. She added in her interpretation fire and abandon, which filled her playing with richness." It's wonderful stringing together of words. Charles Munch, who actually conducted Heifetz in violin concertos. The newly installed conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, who had often worked with her, wrote, "Dear Ginette, the memory of you will never cease to haunt us, and each time that by the grace of God we are able to make music really well, we shall feel you very close to us." Jacques Thibault, we'll come on to him in a moment, the great French violinist who would himself die in a plane crash shortly afterward, wrote, "Why was it that at the dawn of her days an unjust and relentless stroke of fate should come and cut off a life which was bringing to the world nothing but beauty and joy? But in spite of the sternness of destiny, in the hearts of her friends and of the whole world, Ginette is unforgettable. The memory of her will never die." Conductor Eugene Ormandy called her the greatest woman violinist. Would you agree? Because of course we have Ida Handel and others whose career went on for much longer. And I'll go so far as to say one of the greatest interpreters on the violin of our time. It must have no doubt been an advantage for her to have studied composition as well as studied violin. Ended recordings of Ginette Neveu. Let's single this one out. The most highly praised and revelatory was her Sibelius with the Philharmonia Orchestra and Walter Susskind. Of it, the composer Sibelius wrote, "I particularly wish to speak of my feeling of profound gratitude when I think of the inspired and extremely sensitive performance of my violin concerto, which Ginette Neveu rendered unforgettable." What's your definitive recording of the Sibelius? For me, it's Heifetz, the second recording. Both the Heifetz ones are amazing. Some might say that the definitive version belongs to Ginette Neveu. I wonder what you think about that. And here's a link for some additional recordings. See the description box below. See, the death of Ginette Neveu was one of the great tragedies in violin history. The French violinist was 30 and still a rising star when the Air France flight on which she was travelling crashed into the mountain in the Azores archipelago. Upon her death, the music world responded with grief-stricken testimonials. By all accounts, Neveu was an extraordinary, charismatic performer, possessed of incredible interpretive conviction. She could make long stretches of music feel like one unending phase, and produced a tone of great depth, coloured with a distinctive vibrato which, in her recordings, is especially present in smaller scale repertoire. She was also a sensitive and creative colourist and used slides to great effect for changes of colour and momentum. That's quoting Strings magazine. Of course, she came after Heifetz, so she was no doubt riding on the glissando that Heifetz established, the new modern style of glissando. I must listen to a few more of her recordings in greater depth to capture the nuances of her glissando, but her vibrato has been singled out as being especially beautiful.